The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence. The tension was palpable, like a storm waiting to burst. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, had just called the court to order. On one side of the room, the two white police officers, Officer Mitchell and Officer Evans, sat confidently at their table, their smug expressions betraying their sense of superiority. They had the upper hand in this case. They were the law and they knew it, or so they thought. Across from them, a young black woman named Tasha sat alone at the defendant's table. Her dark eyes, filled with a mixture of defiance and quiet resolve, never wavered. She sat up straight, her back firm against the chair, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress. Tasha's hands were folded neatly in her lap, but her fingers twitched slightly, betraying the nerves that simmered beneath her calm exterior. The officers had just made their accusation. They claimed that Tasha had committed a crime, one that was completely fabricated. It was a lie so clearly woven together that the courtroom felt the weight of it. But Tasha was about to make sure that the truth would rise to the surface, no matter how much the officers tried to bury it. The trial had begun with an almost theatrical performance by the two officers, both of them weaving their tale with ease. Their story was one of misrepresentation, of falsified events and twisted facts designed to paint Tasha as the villain in this narrative. They spoke of an altercation that had supposedly occurred just days before. According to them, Tasha had been involved in a violent incident at a local convenience store, a crime she did not commit. Tasha remained calm, but in her mind, the floodgates were opening. The injustice of it all hit her like a ton of bricks. She had been accused of something she didn't do. They had called her a criminal, trying to destroy her reputation and everything she had worked for. But she knew that the truth would be her weapon. As the officers continued their fabricated tale, Tasha couldn't help but notice the smug smiles on their faces. It was as though they had already won. The judge, a man who had heard countless cases, seemed to believe them without question. His eyes were fixed on the officers as they spoke, their words hanging in the air like a thick, stifling fog. But Tasha wasn't one to be silenced, not by anyone, and certainly not by lies. She had worked too hard to be treated this way, to be belittled and misunderstood. She had seen too many like them, those who thought they could break her spirit because of the color of her skin, and she would not let them get away with it. The courtroom clock ticked away relentlessly, each second stretching longer than the last. The whispers of the spectators could be heard in the background, but Tasha blocked it all out. She wasn't interested in their opinions, in their judgments. She had been wrongly accused, and this was her moment to prove it. The judge turned his attention back to the officers. They had finished their testimony. They sat back in their chairs, their faces now full of self-satisfaction. They thought they had won, but little did they know. This was far from over. Tasha stood up slowly, her feet firm on the floor as she prepared herself for the next move. She knew it would be risky. What she was about to do would make or break her case, but there was no turning back. She had to take a stand. She had to expose the truth. "I'd like to present my evidence," Tasha said calmly, her voice unwavering. The room fell into a stunned silence. The judge raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. The officers exchanged confused glances, not sure of what was coming next. They had expected Tasha to crumble under pressure, to beg for mercy, to apologize for something she hadn't done. But she was not their victim. Not this time. Not ever again. Tasha walked over to the table where her lawyer stood. She took a deep breath, and with a steady hand, she pulled out an envelope. She held it in front of her, making sure that everyone could see it. The officers exchanged nervous glances as Tasha turned to face the judge. "I have evidence that will prove that I am not guilty," Tasha declared, her voice steady and strong. She opened the envelope, pulling out a series of photos. She held them up for the judge, the officers, and the entire courtroom to see. The photos were of the store where the supposed incident had taken place. But these were no ordinary photos. These were security camera stills. The images clearly showed the officers, Officer Mitchell and Officer Evans, engage in a conversation with the store owner just moments before the supposed altercation. The footage was clear. It was damning. Tasha had been right. The officers had been involved in something much bigger, something they had tried to cover up. They had fabricated the story to hide their own wrongdoing, to protect their image and their reputations. They thought they could intimidate Tasha into silence, but now the truth was out. The courtroom gasped collectively as the implications of the photos sank in. Officer Mitchell's face flushed, his earlier confidence crumbling before him. Officer Evans looked around in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, but it was too late. The truth had been revealed, and there was no escaping it. The judge glanced at the photos, then back at the officers. His expression hardened. It was clear that the officers had been caught in their lies, their once pristine reputations now shattered in an instant. "Officer Mitchell, Officer Evans," the judge said coldly, his voice carrying the weight of the authority. "You are under investigation for falsifying evidence and misconduct. You will be detained for further questioning." The officers stood frozen, unable to move, their eyes wide with disbelief. This was not how they had envisioned the day going. They had thought they were untouchable, that they could manipulate the system to their advantage. But Tasha had proved them wrong. As the officers were escorted out of the courtroom, Tasha stood tall. The tension in the room began to dissipate, and a sense of justice filled the air. Tasha had done it. She had exposed the truth, and she had done it with unwavering courage. She had stood up to the very people who had tried to destroy her life, and now they were the ones facing the consequences. But even in that moment of victory, Tasha knew this was just the beginning. This wasn't just about one case or one wrongful accusation. This was about all the people who had been silenced, all the voices that had been ignored. This was a victory for justice, but it was also a call for change. She had proven that the truth would always come to light, no matter how hard some people tried to keep it buried. Tasha took a deep breath, watching as the officers were escorted out of the courtroom, their faces a mix of disbelief and shame. They had underestimated her, misjudged her strength. But it wasn't just about them. It was about all the people who were silenced, all the people who had faced similar injustices and had no way to fight back. Tasha's victory was a small yet powerful win in a much bigger battle for justice. She knew this moment was significant, but the war wasn't over. The courtroom was still in a state of shock, whispers filling the air as people processed what had just happened. The judge, still recovering from the sudden turn of events, slammed his gavel down. "Court is adjourned," he declared, his voice more powerful than ever before. "The investigation will begin immediately, and further action will be taken against the accused officers." As the crowd began to dissipate, Tasha remained seated at her table, her hands still resting in her lap. Her heart was racing, but she couldn't shake the feeling of satisfaction that slowly settled in. This wasn't just her victory. It was a victory for anyone who had ever felt powerless, who had ever been wrongfully accused or oppressed. She stood up, walking out of the courtroom, with her head held high. The air felt different now, lighter. Justice had been served, but Tasha knew this moment was just a chapter in a much bigger story. She didn't want to be remembered just for exposing the lies of a few officers. She wanted to be remembered for pushing for systemic change, change that could help protect people like her, people who often went unheard and unnoticed. But outside the courtroom, as she walked toward the parking lot, Tasha was approached by a familiar face, a reporter she had seen covering the trial. The reporter was a woman in her 30s, with a professional camera hanging around her neck. "Ms. Jenkins," the reporter called out, jogging to catch up with her. "Can I get a statement?" Tasha paused, turning toward the woman. She had expected this. She had known the media would catch wind of what had happened, but she wasn't prepared for what came next. "I just want to say that today wasn't just about me," Tasha said, her voice calm but firm. "This is a victory for all the people who have been wrongfully accused, for all the Black men and women who have been mistreated by those who are supposed to protect us. This isn't just one story. This is a call to action." The reporter nodded, her pen ready to take notes. "So what's next for you?" Tasha smiled, a sense of determination in her eyes. "I'm going to continue fighting. This is just the beginning. We need to work together to make sure that no one else has to go through what I went through. The truth has to come out, and we can't stop until it does. The reporter seemed taken aback, but she quickly nodded, jotting down Tasha's words. You've made an impact today, Ms. Jenkins. Your story's going to inspire a lot of people. Tasha didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at the sky, taking in a deep breath of fresh air. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe again. But she knew that the fight wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. Weeks went by, and Tasha's story was all over the news. The officers involved were put under investigation, and the truth about their misconduct began to spread like wildfire. Tasha had been praised for her bravery, her determination, and her unwavering commitment to justice. But there was still much to be done. She knew that her case was just one of many, and that the real work was in changing a broken system. One evening, as she sat at home, going over notes for a public speech she had been invited to give, Tasha received an unexpected phone call. The number was unlisted, but something told her that this wasn't an ordinary call. She answered, her heart already pounding in her chest. "Hello, Ms. Jenkins," the voice on the other end said. "We need to talk." Tasha's mind raced, wondering who could be calling her now. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. "I'm someone who can help you," the voice replied. "I've been watching your case closely, and I think you might be able to do even more than what you've already done. But you need to be careful. There are forces at play here that you don't know about. You're not just up against a few bad cops." Tasha's curiosity grew. "What do you mean?" "Meet me tomorrow night," the voice said cryptically. "I'll explain everything, but you need to be ready. The truth is bigger than you think." The line went dead. Tasha sat in stunned silence, the weight of the conversation settling on her shoulders. She had no idea who the caller was or what they meant by forces at play, but one thing was clear. She was in for something much bigger than just the officers who had wronged her. The next day, she found herself walking through a park at dusk, her senses heightened. The phone call had left her with more questions than answers, but she was determined to find out the truth. She wasn't afraid. After everything she had been through, she knew that nothing could stop her now. As she reached the park bench where the mysterious caller had told her to meet, a tall man in a dark suit emerged from the shadows. He walked up to her, his face unreadable, his eyes intense. "You're Tasha Jenkins, right?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Who are you?" "I'm someone who can help you bring down a whole network of corruption," the man said. "The officers you exposed were just pawns. There's a bigger game being played here, and I need you to help me stop it." Tasha's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. "What do you want me to do?" "We'll talk soon," the man said. "But first, we need to make sure you're safe." The man's words haunted Tasha as she walked home that evening. A bigger game? Corruption? Who else was involved? The stakes had just been raised, and Tasha was ready to take her fight to the next level. She had uncovered one layer of deception, but now it was time to dig deeper, to go further than she ever had before. The truth was out there, but so was the danger. Tasha knew that the world she had stepped into was more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. But she was ready to face whatever came next. She had already proven that she wouldn't back down, no matter the cost. She wouldn't stop fighting until every lie was exposed,